Hello and welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping into something really massive today.
Yeah, the energy is definitely high for this one.
Yeah.
It's one of those foundational topics that just explains so much.
It really does. But before we get into the heavy lifting, I need to set the stage for everyone listening.
Right.
This deep dive serves as a full summary for UPSC, focused by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. And we're coming at this with complete PYQ linkage.
Which is so crucial, tying the concepts back to those previous year questions so you actually know how to apply this stuff.
Exactly. We are basically condensing hours of study into a single power-packed session for you. But we do have a humble request.
Yeah, please do subscribe to the channel.
Subscribe to the channel. And look, if you are capable, please support the team on Patreon. It's the only way we can keep bringing this super useful content to you week after week.
Oh, absolutely. That
Yeah.
support is literally the backbone of this whole operation.
And a huge shout out to all our current supporters. You help us immensely in creating this content. Also, do not forget to like the video and share your valuable comments down below. We actually read them.
Yeah, the comments shape where we go next, honestly.
Free. One last bit of housekeeping, I promise. Free notes with practice PYQs are available right now on the public Telegram channel.
But if you want the real competitive edge,
Yeah, the premium stuff. To access all the videos of this series at once, plus premium detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers in a super organized way, you need to join the private Telegram library.
just DM us on the public Telegram channel to get in.
Okay, housekeeping done. Let's get to work. Today we're looking at the Indian economy. Specifically, we're zooming in on poverty in the social sector.
Right.
And our primary roadmap for this is Chapter 4 of Sanjeev Verma's Indian economy.
But we're also heavily pulling from Vivek Singh's Indian economy to clarify the concepts and bring in those crucial data updates.
Because Verma gives us that structural narrative, the story of poverty, the why and the how, while Singh really grounds it with the hard numbers.
Yeah, that synthesis is exactly what you need for a complete understanding.
So what's our mission here? Because honestly, poverty sounds like a topic where we could just read off a list of really depressing statistics for an hour.
And we definitely want to avoid that. The mission is to look beyond the stats. We need to understand the structural nature of poverty.
Like why it's so incredibly stubborn.
Exactly. Why it persists. We're going to trace the evolution of the social sector, look at financial tools like microfinance and the JAM Trinity, and then...
We'll cap it off with big future debates.
Right, like universal basic income.
Okay, so let's unpack segment 1, defining the undefinable. It sounds so simple, but how do we actually define who is poor in India? I mean, is it just about not having money in your wallet?
It's surprisingly complex and, honestly, highly debated.
Yeah.
If you look at Sanjeev Verma's text, he starts with a very fundamental, almost stark definition. Poverty is defined as the minimum basic consumption level essential for survival.
Essential for survival. That's a very low bar. We are not talking about a comfortable life here.
No, not at all. We're talking about the absolute floor. Historically, the Planning Commission defined this not in terms of rupees, but literally in terms of fuel for the human body.
The calorie count.
Yeah, calories.
I remember reading this. It's different for rural and urban areas, right?
Correct. The traditional definition set the poverty line at 2,400 kilocalories per person per day in rural areas and 2,100 kilocalories in urban areas.
Okay, wait. Let me guess why there's a gap there. Rural life traditionally involves a lot more heavy manual labor, like farming. So your body physically requires more fuel.
That's exactly the rationale. The assumption is that the physical exertion demands higher energy intake just to maintain basic bodily functions.
So if you aren't getting those 2,400 calories, you are basically starving. You are physically depleting day by day.
Right, and by definition, you are in absolute poverty.
How does that compare globally, though? I know the World Bank has its own yardstick that everyone talks about.
They do, because they need a universal definition to compare India with Brazil or Kenya. Originally, it was the famous less than $1 a day metric.
But that's changed, right, because of inflation.
Yeah, over time it's been updated. The current standard often cited in these texts is around $1.90 at purchasing power parity, or PPP.
PPP is the magic word there, because a dollar converted straight to rupees buys you a completely different lifestyle in India than it does in New York.
Precisely. If we just use the raw exchange rate, the numbers wouldn't reflect actual living conditions at all. PPP levels the playing field.
It creates that basket of goods comparison.
Right. It looks at what that money actually buys in the local economy.
Which brings up a really important distinction that I think confuses a lot of students, especially when writing answers. The difference between absolute poverty and relative poverty.
It is a vital distinction for the exam. Absolute poverty is what we just talked about, the calories, the basic survival level.
You literally lack food, shelter, and clothing.
Yes, you do not have enough to subsist. And this is the main metric for India because, frankly, our primary challenge has been keeping people alive and fed.
And relative poverty.
Relative poverty is about inequality. It's about your standing compared to everyone else around you.
So I might have enough calories to not die, but if I earn a fraction of what my neighbor earns, I'm relatively poor.
Exactly. You are excluded from the standard of living that society considers normal. Developed nations focus a lot on relative poverty. In India, while inequality is a huge issue, the policy focus has structurally been on absolute poverty.
That makes total sense. Now, we really can't discuss Indian poverty without diving into the committees. It feels like every few years, a new expert committee comes along and completely rewires the math.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
But it represents the government's attempt to get the measurement right, because how you measure it dictates how you fund the solutions.
Right, you had the Lakdawala committee.
Then the Tendulkar committee, and later the Rangarajan committee.
For someone prepping for the exam, which one is the gold standard to cite?
The Tendulkar Committee estimates from 2011-12 are still the most commonly referenced benchmark in official contexts, even though Rangarajan tried to update the methodology later.
And what did Tendulkar say?
Tendulkar placed India's poverty at 21.9%.
21.9%. That is roughly 1 in every 5 Indians living below that survival line.
Yes. And when you convert that percentage into absolute numbers, it is staggering. We're talking about approximately 27 crore people.
270 million people. That is nearly the entire population of the United States.
Right. Imagine the entire U.S. population living without basic subsistence. That's the sheer scale we are dealing with.
Verma makes a really sharp point about this in the book, doesn't he? That despite all our GDP growth, we still host the largest number of poor people in the world.
He calls it the real India versus the new India. We have this new India with high-tech hubs, massive unicorns, space missions to the moon.
But then there's this massive block of humanity stuck in subsistence.
Exactly. And the crucial thing to remember for your mains answers is that this poverty is not an even blanket spread across the country.
Right, there's a geography to it.
Yes, there is a very specific dense belt. States like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal. These states alone account for over 50% of India's total poverty.
So if you are born in a rural village in Bihar, your statistical likelihood of being in absolute poverty is just drastically higher than if you were born in Punjab or Kerala.
Drastically higher. It's a localized structural crisis.
Which brings us to the biggest question, the why. We have been an independent republic for over 7 decades. We had the 5-year plans, we had the 1991 economic reforms. Why does this persist so stubbornly?
Well, Sanjeev Verma highlights a few deeply rooted structural reasons. The most glaring one is our continued dependence on subsistence agriculture.
We are just way too reliant on farming.
Disproportionately so. Agriculture employs almost half of the country's workforce, but it contributes less than 18% to the overall GDP.
So you have too many people splitting a very small slice of the economic pie.
Exactly. The per capita income in that sector is inherently structurally low, and it's often rain-fed, traditional low-tech farming. It's incredibly vulnerable.
But wait, why don't they just leave the farm, move to the city, and get a factory job?
That is the second structural problem, the lack of manufacturing jobs. Economists often refer to India's trajectory as jobless growth.
Because our service sector boomed instead.
Right. The IT sector, finance, telecommunications, they exploded and drove GDP up. But those sectors require advanced education. They need skills. English proficiency.
They aren't going to hire a landless laborer from rural Odisha.
Exactly. We completely leapfrogged the massive labor-intensive industrial revolution that countries like China or Vietnam used to absorb millions of unskilled workers from their farms.
So that landless laborer is illiterate, has no assets, can't code software, and there are no textile or assembly line jobs waiting for him.
He is trapped. That is what we mean by structural poverty. It isn't a temporary setback or a bad harvest year. It is an economic system that literally does not have a ladder for him to climb.
Amartya Sen talks about this, right? The lack of capability to even participate in the growth story.
Yes, capability deprivation. He lacks the tools, health, education, skills to enter the modern economy.
That is a grim picture, but a necessary one to understand. Let's pivot to what the state is actually doing about it. Segment 2, the social sector.
And here we see a very distinct shift in the government's philosophy over the years.
Yeah, it feels like we went from politicians just talking about development to constantly using this phrase inclusive growth. Is that just a rebranding exercise?
No, it was a very meaningful policy shift. Development, historically, was just about making the GDP line go up. If 10 industrial conglomerates get massively richer and the rural poor stay exactly the same, your GDP still looks great.
But inclusive growth changes that metric.
Right. It mandates that the benefits of macroeconomic growth must visibly reach the bottom of the pyramid. It's an open acknowledgement that the old trickle-down economics just wasn't trickling down fast enough.
So how does the government operationalize that? Verma outlines a specific framework.
He does. It's essentially a three-pronged strategy. And if you are taking notes for the exam, this is a fantastic framework to structure your essays around.
Okay, let's hear the three prongs.
Number 1, wage employment schemes. Number 2, self-employment schemes. And number 3, food security.
Let's break those down using the specific schemes from both Verma and Singh's texts. Wage employment, the crown jewel there, has to be MGNREGA.
The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It is arguably the most ambitious Social Security and public works project in human history.
It guarantees 100 days of unskilled work to rural households, right? But what actually makes it different from the old schemes from the 80s where they just paid people to dig a ditch and fill it back up?
The absolute key word is guarantees. It is a rights-based framework. You, as a rural citizen, have a legal, statutory right to demand work from the state.
And if the local government can't find work for you?
If they cannot provide employment within 15 days of your demand, they are legally obligated to pay you an unemployment allowance.
That fundamentally shifts the power dynamic. It's not charity anymore, it's an entitlement.
Exactly. It empowers the citizen. Plus, it has mandatory provisions for women. A huge percentage of the beneficiaries must be women, which aids gender parity.
And the social audits.
Yes, Gram Sabas conducts social audits to check for local corruption. And crucially, MGNREGA is demand-driven.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning the budget allocation isn't rigidly fixed top-down. If there is a severe drought in Maharashtra, the demand for work spikes, and the scheme automatically scales up to absorb that distress in real time.
Okay, that covers wage employment. What about the second prong, self-employment?
This is about creating durable assets so people can generate their own livelihoods. We see this with the National Rural Livelihood Mission, or NRLM.
The goal is basically turning a job seeker into a micro-entrepreneur.
Right, helping them set up self-help groups, giving them seed capital, training them in a craft or a trade so they aren't just relying on daily wage labor forever.
And the third prong was food security,
which is operationalized through the Targeted Public Distribution System, the TPDS, and specialized schemes like the Antyodaya Anna Yojana.
It's for the poorest of the poor, right?
Yes. It creates a baseline safety net. So no matter how bad the economic shock is, you do not face starvation.
Now, both Verma and Singh also highlight some of the newer umbrella schemes. Ayushman Bharat is a big one.
Because poverty isn't just about income, it's about vulnerabilities. You could be a family hovering just above the poverty line, earning a decent wage, and then one catastrophic illness hits.
A surgery, a prolonged hospital stay.
And it completely wipes out generations of savings. You are plunged right back into absolute poverty. Economists call this the health poverty trap.
And Ayushman Bharat is the shield against that.
Exactly. It has two pillars, but the major one is providing an insurance cover of 5 lakh rupees per family per year, targeting around 10 crore poor and vulnerable families. It's government-funded secondary and tertiary care.
To protect their assets. Then there is Poshan Abhiyan,
the National Nutrition Mission. Because calories aren't enough if the food lacks nutrients. This tackles the silent crisis of malnutrition, stunting, and anemia, particularly in children and pregnant women.
And we have to mention PM-KISAN. This felt like a massive paradigm shift when it was announced.
It was a monumental shift in agricultural policy. Historically, India supported farmers primarily through price interventions, the minimum support price, or MSP. We promised to buy their crops at a certain rate.
But PM-KISAN is totally different.
It moves toward direct income support. The government just transfers pure cash, 6,000 rupees a year, in 3 installments, directly into the farmer's bank account. It doesn't matter what they grow or if the crop fails.
We're definitely going to circle back to why cash transfers are becoming the preferred tool when we discuss the JAM Trinity later. Add in housing for all under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and it sounds like the government has all bases covered.
It looks comprehensive on paper.
But here's the cynic's question. We have MGNREGA, Ayushman Bharat, PM-KISAN, free rations, housing subsidies. Why is the social sector still struggling? Why is poverty still our central economic challenge?
That is the multi-trillion rupee question. And the consensus among experts, which Verma highlights, usually boils down to one massive hurdle: implementation.
The dreaded leakage.
Leakage is a very sanitized, polite economic term for systemic theft, corruption, and bureaucratic inefficiency.
Rajiv Gandhi famously said that for every rupee meant for the poor, only 15 paisa reaches them.
Right, that was the reality for decades. The delivery architecture was just incredibly porous.
Where is all that money going?
An army of middlemen, corrupt local officials, administrative overheads, and then you have the phenomenon of ghost beneficiaries.
Ghost beneficiaries. It sounds like a horror movie.
For the exchequer, it is. These are names on a beneficiary list that simply do not exist in reality. A local official invents a fake family, issues a fake ration card, collects the subsidized wheat every month, and sells it on the black market at a premium.
Or they just duplicate real names so someone gets triple the benefits.
Exactly. So the state is pouring billions of rupees into a bucket that is completely riddled with holes.
Which means the actual targeted poor person gets nothing?
And that highlights the critical need for what we call narrow targeting.
Defining exactly who needs help and making sure only they get it.
Yes. The intent of the social sector schemes was always noble, but the archaic, paper-based delivery machinery was fundamentally broken.
Which is a perfect segue to the financial side of the equation, because if you are poor and want to start a small business to escape poverty, you need capital, you need credit.
But the formal banking system sees you as an unviable risk. You have zero collateral, no land, no assets.
So the bank manager turns you away, and where do you go? To the local village moneylender.
Who charges you extortionate interest rates, 30, 40, sometimes 50% a month?
It's the ultimate poverty trap. You need credit to escape poverty, but you can't get affordable credit because you're in poverty.
Precisely. And for a long time, there seemed to be no solution, until microfinance came along. Segment 3, banking on the poor.
The premise here is almost ironic, isn't it? The poor actually make incredibly reliable borrowers if you structure it right.
It's true. They have an incredibly high propensity to repay, largely out of fear of losing their only lifeline.
This whole concept started with Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, didn't it?
Yes, that was the pioneering model. In India, it evolved into something slightly different, the SHG-Bank linkage model. And this was largely championed and subsidized by NABARD.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of this. If I'm a bank, why on earth am I suddenly willing to lend to people with absolutely no collateral?
Because the model replaces physical collateral with social collateral.
How does that work in practice?
Imagine a village. 10 or 12 women come together and form a self-help group, an SHG. They start by saving tiny amounts of their own money, maybe 50 rupees a month each.
Okay, so they pool it together.
They pool it, they keep meticulous records, they might lend small amounts to each other from that pool for emergencies. After about 6 months of this, they've demonstrated financial discipline.
And that's when the bank steps in.
Right. The local bank branch looks at their ledger and says, okay, you have discipline. We will now offer a formal loan, not to any individual woman, but to the SHG as a collective entity.
Ah, so the group is liable.
Exactly. If one woman takes a portion of that loan to buy a sewing machine and she defaults, the entire group loses their access to future credit.
So the peer pressure is immense.
The peer pressure is the collateral. The women ensure everyone repays. And it worked brilliantly. It empowered women, it bypassed the moneylender, and it boasted repayment rates of over 98%.
Wow. But as Verma discusses, whenever there is success, greed usually follows. We have to talk about the Andhra crisis. What went wrong?
The success of the SHG model attracted private, for-profit microfinance institutions, or MFIs. They looked at those 98% repayment rates and saw a gold mine.
So they flooded the market with cash.
They rushed in. And to maximize profits, they completely abandoned the slow, careful group-building process. They started aggressive, predatory lending.
Almost like the subprime mortgage crisis in the U.S., but at a micro level.
Very similar mechanics. They were pushing loans onto vulnerable people who couldn't afford them. And crucially, they weren't lending for productive assets like a sewing machine or a cow.
What were they lending for?
Consumption. Paying for a lavish daughter's wedding or taking a new loan just to pay the interest on an older loan from a different MFI. Multiple lending became rampant.
And when these over-leveraged borrowers inevitably couldn't pay.
The MFIs resorted to brutal recovery tactics.
Right.
Their agents used public shaming, coercion, sometimes physical harassment. It created a severe wave of rural distress, culminating in a tragic spate of farmer and borrower suicides, heavily concentrated in Andhra Pradesh around 2010.
So microfinance morphed from a Nobel-winning savior into a predatory villain.
It was a massive wake-up call. It forced the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, to aggressively step in and regulate the sector.
What did the RBI do?
They capped the interest rates MFIs could charge. They instituted strict rules on recovery practices to stop the harassment. They basically had to ensure that these MFIs didn't just become corporate versions of the local loan shark.
It's a harsh lesson that financial inclusion without strict regulatory oversight can be incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely.
Now, learning from that, the government realized that we still need to formalize lending, especially for small entrepreneurs, but in a safe, structured way. And this brings us to a massive initiative, MUDRA.
Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, PMMY.
The tagline for this is funding the unfunded, right?
That perfectly captures the objective. MUDRA targets the non-corporate, non-farm, small, and micro enterprises.
Give me an example of who that is.
The guy running a roadside motorcycle repair shop, the vegetable vendor, the local artisan making pottery.
The informal sector.
Yes. These micro-businesses are the actual engine of local employment, but they are entirely invisible to large commercial banks. MUDRA stake tend to provide loans up to 10 lakh rupees without requiring collateral.
And they structure it in 3 tiers, which have these great names reflecting growth.
Right. It's modeled on the stages of life. First is Shishu, which means child. These are loans up to 50,000 rupees.
That's for the absolute beginner, buying a cart, buying a first set of tools.
Exactly. Then you have Kishore, meaning adolescent. This covers loans from 50,000 up to 5 lakh rupees. This is for a business that's established but needs capital to expand inventory or buy a bigger machine.
And the final tier.
Tarun, meaning young adult. Loans from 5 lakh up to 10 lakh rupees. This is the growth and formalization stage.
The broader macroeconomic significance here isn't just handing out money, though. It's about pulling the massive informal sector into the formal financial ecosystem.
That is the real victory. Instead of staying off the grid and borrowing from a moneylender, that vegetable vendor gets a MUDRA loan from a formal bank. They start building a verifiable credit history.
They leave a digital footprint.
Exactly. They enter the formal system, which is essential for long-term structural poverty alleviation.
But, and this is the critical bottleneck, to enter that formal system, you need a verifiable identity. And for the government to reach you, they need a secure way to move money.
Which perfectly sets up segment 4, spreading jam across the Indian economy.
Jam. The jam Trinity. It sounds delicious, but it is actually the technological backbone of modern Indian welfarism. Break the acronym down for us.
J stands for Jan Dhan, A stands for Aadhaar, and M stands for mobile.
Let's connect this back to what we discussed earlier. How does this technological trinity solve that massive leakage problem? How does it stop the ghost beneficiaries?
Well, Aadhaar is the ghostbuster.
That's a great way to phrase it.
Think about the old system. You could easily fake a signature on a register, you could forge a paper ration card, you could invent a family, but you cannot fake your biometric iris scan or your fingerprint.
So by making Aadhaar mandatory for welfare,
By linking the beneficiary databases to Aadhaar, the government performed massive deduplication. They scrubbed the lists. The computer simply cross-referenced the biometrics and automatically deleted millions of fake, duplicate, and ghost entries.
okay, so the ghosts are exorcised, the lift is clean, but now you still have to physically get the money to the genuine person in a remote village without a middleman stealing it.
That is where the J comes in, Jan Dhan. The Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana was a massive Guinness World record-breaking drive to open zero-balance bank accounts for the unbanked.
We opened hundreds of millions of accounts in a matter of months.
Yes, it achieved massive financial inclusion. Suddenly, the central treasury had a direct digital pipe right into the pocket of the poorest citizen, bypassing the entire local bureaucratic maze.
It solves the last-mile delivery problem and the M-Mobile.
The mobile phone is the empowerment tool. It's the information delivery
Because
mechanism.
they get an SMS alert.
Exactly. The moment the subsidy hits the Jan Dhan account, the beneficiary gets a text message. Knowledge is power. The local official can no longer lie and say, oh, the funds haven't arrived from Delhi yet.
Because the beneficiary is looking at the SMS on their phone saying the money is there.
Right. And together, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile form the infrastructure that enables DBT. direct benefit transfer.
We mentioned this with PM-KISAN, moving money instead of physical goods.
Instead of the government procuring wheat, storing it in leaky warehouses, transporting it via corrupt truck drivers to corrupt ration shop owners.
You just send the cash equivalent directly to the mother's Dhan account.
Exactly. It cuts out the middleman entirely. The efficiency gains are massive. And economists love it because it reduces market distortions.
How so?
If you heavily subsidize the price of urea fertilizer, farmers will overuse it because it's cheap, which ruins the soil. But if you charge market price for urea and instead give the farmer cash via DBT, they're incentivized to use only what they need and save the rest of the cash.
It assumes the poor are rational economic actors who know what's best for themselves.
Which they overwhelmingly are.
Okay, so we've covered the structure of poverty, we've looked at the schemes, we've looked at MUDRA financing, and the JAM delivery pipes. Now let's look at the frontier, segment 5.
Universal Basic Income, UBI.
This is the radical idea. It feels like every couple of years, this debate absolutely dominates the economic circles. The Economic Survey dedicated a whole chapter to it a few years ago. What is the core philosophical concept here?
It is a total paradigm shift from how we currently do welfare. Right now, welfare is targeted. The government spends massive resources trying to identify the poor, verify them, and then deliver specific goods to them, like housing or work or grain.
And as we discussed, targeting is messy. There are inclusion errors where rich people get the benefit and exclusion errors where the truly poor get left out.
UBI says throw targeting out the window. Stop the bureaucracy. Just give a flat, basic cash income to everyone. Well, the ideal form has 3 non-negotiable components. First, universality. Everyone gets it, rich or poor, which completely eliminates the cost and corruption of trying to identify beneficiaries.
Or at least a very large quasi-universal section of the population to make it fiscally viable in India.
Right. Second, unconditionality. There are absolutely no strings attached. You don't have to prove you are poor. You don't have to show up for manual labor like MGNREGA. You just receive it by virtue of being a citizen.
And the third?
Agency. This is the deepest philosophical point. Traditional welfare is paternalistic. The state says, we know you need wheat, here is wheat. Cash transfers respect the agency of the poor.
Because the state doesn't actually know what a specific family needs on a specific Tuesday.
Exactly. Maybe this month they have enough food, but they urgently need to buy asthma medication for their child. UBI gives them the cash to make that choice.
It sounds incredibly elegant, like a silver bullet, so why aren't we doing it tomorrow?
Because the arguments against it are equally formidable.
Let's run through the debate. Give me the primary arguments for UBI first.
Social justice is the main one, wiping out extreme poverty overnight. Then there's administrative efficiency. Imagine the savings if you close down hundreds of leaky, overlapping central and state schemes and fire all the middlemen and just run a centralized computer algorithm that deposits cash every month.
Plus, it acts as a shock absorber.
Yes. If a pandemic hits or a massive drought, people already have a guaranteed income floor. They don't immediately fall into starvation.
Okay, now hit me with the reality check. The arguments against.
The first and most obvious is the fiscal cost.
The math.
The sheer math. Can the Indian government afford it? Sending a meaningful amount of cash to 1.4 billion people is astronomically expensive. The fear is that to fund UBI, the government would have to defund essential public goods.
Like shutting down public schools or hospitals to afford the cash payouts, which defeats the purpose.
Exactly. The second major argument is moral hazard.
The idea that if you give people free money, they will become lazy and stop working.
Right. It's a common fear among conservative policymakers. Though, to be objective, most expert pilot studies globally and in India suggest this is largely a myth. People don't stop working, they use the baseline security to take entrepreneurial risks, or they refuse exploitative, dangerous labor.
And the third fear.
Vice spending. Paternalists argue that if you give pure cash to a rural patriarch, he won't buy nutritious food for the family. He'll spend it on alcohol or tobacco.
Is there data backing that up?
Again, empirical evidence largely contradicts this. When cash is transferred, especially if routed to female heads of households via Dhan, it overwhelmingly goes towards nutrition, education, and health.
But there is a much deeper nuance to this debate, and this is where Vivek Singh and Verma's texts really align, the debate between UBI and UBS.
Yes, universal basic services. This is the crux of the capability argument.
Break this down for the listener because this is absolute gold for a mains essay on poverty. UBI versus UBS.
It goes back to Amartya Sen's concept of capability deprivation. Poverty is not just a lack of rupees in your pocket. It is the lack of capability to lead a dignified, fulfilling life.
Okay, so how does that challenge UBI?
Well, suppose the government gives a rural villager a UBI of 2,000 rupees a month. They have the cash. But if the local government clinic has no doctors or medicine, and the local school has no teachers, what good is the cash?
You can't buy healthcare on the free market in a village that has no hospital.
Exactly. Cash is utterly useless if the physical infrastructure of human development does not exist.
So the UBS advocates say,
They argue that India is not ready for UBI. They argue that the state's limited fiscal resources must first be deployed to build universal basic services: world-class free public health, free quality education, clean drinking water, sanitation.
because once you provide those services universally, you automatically raise the capability of the poor to earn their own income.
Right. The consensus is that UBI is a fascinating destination, but UBS is the necessary bridge to get there. You cannot substitute state infrastructure with a monthly cash deposit.
That is a phenomenal conceptual clarity point right there. Now, before we hit the outro, we need to briefly touch on segment 6. We mentioned it as one of the prongs, but agriculture and food security really deserves its own quick spotlight.
It does, because it's quite literally the first line of defense against absolute destitution. The National Food Security Act, the NFSA, is the legislative backbone here.
And the coverage of the NFSA is just mind-boggling.
It legally covers up to 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population.
Over 800 million people guaranteed highly subsidized food grain.
It's the largest food security program on earth. It ensures that even if you have zero income, even if every other safety net fails, you will receive enough basic carbohydrate fuel to survive.
But it's not without massive challenges, right?
Yeah.
Verma talks about the FCI.
The Food Corporation of India. The logistics of procuring, moving, and storing millions of tons of grain are a nightmare. We routinely see images of grain rotting in open yards under the monsoon rain because of a lack of scientific storage.
Which is a tragedy in a country that still battles child malnutrition.
It is. But structurally, food security must be secured before you can tackle any higher-order economic problems.
Yeah.
You simply cannot educate a hungry child, and a starving adult cannot participate in a jobs program. It is the absolute foundation.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's try to summarize this journey for everyone taking notes.
Right. We started at the absolute floor, the definition of poverty looking at calories, survival, and the stark reality of the Tendulkar estimates.
The 21.9%. The geography of the real India concentrated in those central and eastern states.
And we tracked the state's response. The philosophical shift from mere development to inclusive growth, operationalized through massive schemes like the rights-based MGNREGA.
We looked at the financial mechanisms, how microfinance tried to help hit the Andhra crisis due to predatory lending, and how the government responded by formalizing credit through Mudra for the unfunded micro-entrepreneurs.
And we looked at the delivery architecture, how the JAM, Trinity, Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile is actively being used to perform deduplication, kill ghost beneficiaries, and enable direct cash transfers.
And finally, we debated the future. The allure of UBI, universal basic income, weighed heavily against the pressing, immediate need for UBS, universal basic services.
It's a comprehensive arc of India's ongoing battle against its greatest challenge.
And out of all of this, the one concept that really sticks with me, the one I want the listener to mull over, is Amartya Sen's capability deprivation.
It fundamentally changes how you view the economy.
It really does. It poses a provocative question. Is the ultimate goal of our economic policy just to increase the aggregate GDP numbers on a spreadsheet? Or is the true purpose of an economy to constantly expand the freedom and capability of its citizens to lead the lives they actually value?
If it's the latter, then our work in the social sector is just beginning.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
It's been a really intense, incredibly rewarding session to explore this with you all.
If you found value in this breakdown, if it clarified these massive concepts for you, please subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel.
And a humble request once again. If you are capable, please support us on Patreon.
It is the only way we can afford the time and resources to keep creating this high-quality, ad-free content for you. Big shout out to our current supporters. You guys literally make this possible.
Don't forget to like this video and drop a valuable comment below. Tell us what topic or which chapter you want us to tackle next.
Remember, the free notes and those crucial practice PYQs are waiting for you right now on the public Telegram channel.
And for the serious learners, the ones who want the complete edge, Join the private Telegram library.
That gets you access to all the videos, the premium detailed notes, the extra PYQs, and the model mains answers. Just DM us on the public Telegram channel to get in.
Keep grinding. Keep learning.
Stay curious, everyone. We will see you on the next deep dive.